He hated people like her, so he didn't understand how he fell in love. But her? She had no idea who he was. When Kayla arrived in town, she didn't expect anyone to notice her, let alone follow her with their eyes. She was used to being the outsider, but this town felt different. Quiet, heavy, like it held secrets people didn't talk about anymore, just passed around in stares. The first person who approached her was him, Josh. He saw her in the library, flipping through a James Baldwin book, and something in him shifted. He felt it immediately, and he hated that he did. Josh wasn't the type to fall for anyone, let alone someone like her. Not because she wasn't beautiful, not because she wasn't kind, but because she represented everything he thought he stood against. He was raised on lines, invisible ones, strict ones, ones that never blurred. But in that moment, they did. He introduced himself like nothing was wrong, said he liked her taste in books, asked where she was from. He told himself he was just being friendly, told himself it meant nothing. But deep down, he already knew. He was falling, and it terrified him. What he didn't know was that the town was watching, and they knew exactly what he used to be. Josh kept finding reasons to run into her. At the bookstore, in line for coffee, even near her apartment like he was just bumping into her by chance. He asked casual questions that felt like tests. Have you ever been to one of those African festivals? Do you listen to real hip-hop or just the mainstream stuff? Kayla smiled, answered politely, not realizing yet how strange it all was. He talked about Malcolm X and jazz as if he were trying to prove something. She thought maybe he was just awkward, someone trying too hard to connect. What she didn't know was that Josh wasn't just any guy in town. 2 years ago, his name had been in every group chat, every PTA meeting, every community whisper. He led the outrage when the school tried to introduce Black history as a full course. Called it agenda pushing. Started a petition. Went viral, but not in a good way. And while he'd gone quiet since then, people hadn't forgotten. So when they saw him chatting up Kayla like he'd never shouted in those meetings, it didn't sit right. A local mom took a photo from across the street and sent it with a message. Does she know who that is? Kayla didn't understand the looks at first. She thought maybe people were just curious about the new girl in town, but the longer she spent outside, the more she felt the shift. The woman at the corner store stopped smiling. The barista, who used to ask about her day, suddenly kept things short. And then came the comment, just 5 words whispered at the library exit. You really don't know, huh? She turned, confused, but the woman was already walking away. That night, Kayla got her first anonymous message. It was just a link, no words. She clicked it. A video started to play. Grainy cell phone footage, filmed at a school board meeting. There was yelling, signs, someone screaming, "Keep politics out of our kids' education." Then the camera panned, and there he was. Josh, standing on a table, red-faced, fists clenched, shouting. Kayla stared in silence. She watched him tear down posters about Black authors. She heard his voice calling the curriculum indoctrination. It didn't feel real. The man who complimented her on Baldwin. The man who asked if she liked Coltrane. This was that same man. She closed the laptop and just sat there, cold, still. But she hadn't confronted him yet. She needed to know more, because some part of her still didn't believe it. The next time she saw him, he was waiting outside the bookstore with 2 coffees and that same too perfect smile. Kayla accepted the drink, but not the warmth. Something inside her had shifted. She asked questions this time carefully. Did you grow up here? Do you go to those town meetings? Josh answered quickly, casually, like he had nothing to hide. But then he said something that made her stomach tighten. People around here love to exaggerate. One time I said one thing about a book and suddenly I'm the town villain. He laughed. She didn't. What book? She asked. He paused, then waved it off. I don't even remember. Some activist stuff they were forcing on kids. Her fingers gripped the coffee cup a little tighter. Was it Baldwin? She asked. Silence. His smile froze for half a second. Maybe, he said. That kind of thing. That kind of thing. The words echoed in her head. She excused herself quickly, walked home without looking back. That night, the second video arrived. This one wasn't from a school. It was from a rally. His voice was clearer, his message louder. And this time, she couldn't unhear it. The man she thought was awkward had once screamed, "They don't belong here." Kayla couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the videos, the words, the moments she'd missed. How had she not seen it sooner? The way he overcompensated, the strange references, the forced curiosity. It wasn't interest, it was guilt dressed as admiration. A performance. She felt sick, not because she'd fallen for him, she hadn't, but because he had fallen for her while hiding the very parts of himself that hated who she was. That morning, she walked into the library and saw him sitting in their usual corner. He stood up when he saw her, lit up like nothing was wrong. "Hey," he said, "I was hoping you'd show." Kayla didn't sit. She pulled out her phone and opened the video. She held it up, pressed play, and watched as his smile drained from his face in slow, humiliating silence. "This you?" she asked. He didn't answer. "Because if it is," she said, "I need you to stay the hell away from me." He stammered, tried to explain, said things like, "It was a different time, and I didn't know better, and I've changed," but none of it mattered. Kayla turned and walked out. Behind her, Josh stood frozen, and for the first time, he didn't know what to say. But the story wasn't over, because he still couldn't let her go. Josh didn't leave the library for hours. He just sat there, staring at the door she'd walked through like she might come back and forgive him, but she didn't. And in the days that followed, Kayla stayed silent. No texts, no social media posts, nothing. She disappeared from his life as quickly as she'd entered. But for Josh, the silence was louder than anything. He started calling mutual contacts, asking if she was okay, telling people it was all just a misunderstanding. He even left a note at her apartment door. "Please talk to me. I'm not that person anymore." But the thing he refused to understand was this. She never loved him. She was never his. She had been kind, not interested, friendly, not romantic. And now, knowing the truth, she wasn't even angry. She was done. But Josh, he wasn't done. Because the thing about men like him, they don't know how to let go without turning it into a spectacle. A week later, he showed up outside her work. No warning, no invitation, just standing there with flowers and a desperate look in his eyes. And when she came outside and saw him, she didn't smile. She backed away and said something that finally broke him. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She looked at him like someone looking through glass, distant, unreachable. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Josh held out the flowers like a child offering a peace treaty he didn't understand. "I just wanted to explain," he said. "I was stupid. I didn't know better back then." But Kayla didn't flinch. "Back then?" she said slowly. "You mean when you stood in front of children and told them their history didn't matter? When you tore down posters of people who look like me?" His face reddened, but he kept pushing. "I've changed," he said. "You know me now. I'm not that guy." She stepped forward, close enough for him to feel the weight of her voice. "No," she said, "I don't know you. You knew who you were the whole time. I'm the one who didn't." His mouth opened, but nothing came out. "I was kind," she said. "That's all. And you twisted that into something it never was." The silence between them was brutal. People on the sidewalk had started to notice. A few pulled out their phones. Josh looked down at the flowers, then back up, but Kayla was already walking away. And this time, he knew she wasn't coming back. After that moment outside her job, something in Josh cracked. Not loudly, not publicly, but quietly in the places no one sees. He stopped showing up around town. Stopped speaking up in community forums. The people who used to cheer him on during his activism now avoided eye contact. He wasn't a leader anymore. He was a ghost. And the worst part? He still didn't understand what broke him more. The exposure of his past, or the rejection by the only person who ever made him want to be more. He told himself it wasn't fair, that people change, that he didn't deserve this kind of exile. But the truth kept eating at him. He hadn't changed. Not really. He'd just hidden who he was, polished it, performed it. And now, stripped of the attention, stripped of her, he was left with the thing he'd feared most himself. One day, he walked past the library and saw Kayla inside, laughing with someone else. A young black man, confident, free. They looked happy, natural, in a way Josh never did. He stood there for a moment, watching. Then he turned away. But just before he left, he heard her say something that stopped him cold. He didn't mean to eavesdrop. He told himself he'd only glance inside, just for a second, but what he heard made him freeze. Kayla was laughing softly, mid-conversation, when the guy she was with asked, "So what happened with that other dude? The one people warned you about?" She shook her head, eyes tired but calm. "He didn't love me," she said. "He loved the idea of being forgiven." The words hit Josh like a punch to the gut. She hadn't said them with anger. There was no rage in her voice, no bitterness. Just truth, simple, sharp, final. He backed away from the window, heart pounding, cheeks burning. For weeks, he had replayed their moments, convinced that what they had was real, convinced that if he could just explain, she would understand. But now he saw it clearly. Kayla never saw him as anything more than a stranger trying to pass as someone decent. There was no version of this story where she came back. No second chance. No redemption arc. And the saddest part? She wasn't even trying to hurt him. She was just moving on. And he was finally left behind. Months passed. The town moved on, like towns always do. Kayla found her rhythm-made friends, built trust, carved out a space where she didn't have to shrink herself. And Josh? He became a reminder. Not a monster. Not a martyr. Just a man who wore a mask so long, he thought it had become his face. He still saw her sometimes, from a distance. At the cafe, or walking downtown. He never approached, never spoke. He knew it would mean nothing now, because he'd learned the difference between change and consequence. Change is internal, quiet. It doesn't beg for applause. But consequence? That lingers. It stains. And for him, the stain was permanent. He once thought falling in love with her had changed him. But what changed him was losing the chance to know someone better than the version of himself he tried to pretend to be. And as he sat alone one night, scrolling through the town's community page, he paused on a photo Kayla, smiling, holding a mic at a local event, confident, whole. In a town that once tried to make her feel like a guest, he stared at the photo, heart aching, and whispered to no one, "She never needed me. I needed her to forgive what I never deserved." If that ending hit you in the chest, share this, because some people still think being sorry is enough.